Hi, I'm Cameron Archibald, and you're watching The Full Scottish. Today I'm joined by Linda Fabiani, who's MSP for East Kilbride and also the Deputy Presiding Officer, and Kelly Given, who's a mental health activist and a feminist. Today in the show we'll be discussing different issues. We'll be talking first about Turnberry and Donald Trump, mental health issues, especially around Scott Hutchison, Brexit, especially around Labour's new idea for federalism, and we'll probably end the show on Channel 4's new HQ and Glasgow's bent. But without further ado, let's go on with the show. So let's hit on with headlines today. There was a headline I saw the other day based on Trump. There's two stories. One, Donald Trump banned Iron Brew from Turnberry, but probably the more important issue from that is the fact that the federal funds from the US going to his hotel and the golf course, to which over £5,000 worth, to pay for VIPs in his future visit. And there's this idea of conflicting interest of, is he doing it to kind of support his business? Is it some sort of dodgy dealing? So what would you suspect from that? And is there any other stories that you've heard?
Well, I'm really surprised about that because I just feel that Donald Trump doesn't care about perception. And there's an old saying that politics is all about perception. And very often it is. And certainly to behave like that and use federal funds for his own business, the perception would be that there's something not quite right about that. And I think that's concerning for someone who is the President of the United States. He should be thinking a bit more about the perception of that office.
I mean, you could say possibly that there's been so many sort of scandals, if not, or dodgy stories around Donald Trump that we're all kind of numb to it. It's almost like we're all normalised to that kind of story around Donald Trump now.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, nothing he does surprises me anymore. You know, it would almost be amusing if he wasn't the President of the United States. It's terrifying that he's in charge of, you know, the biggest powerhouse in the world. But yeah, like I say, nothing he does would surprise me anymore. Nothing.
And we know that he will be coming, there's rumour that he's coming to Scotland and not London, which their justification is it's because Scotland will probably not protest. What are the what are the chances of that?
I think you should ask Janie Godley that question.
I can confirm that there will absolutely be a protest, and I might actually be in Brussels for that visit, but if I am here, I will be there with bells on. So
yeah, well, I think I'll go on my holidays.
Well, I mean, if I'm not working, then you know, I'll be watching the news to see what happens. Remember Nigel Farage when he came up here? You know, he had massive protests, and now he's just gone. So it's like, you know, it seems like Scotland's always be ready for the next person to come in line to have a protest.
To have a go at. We quite like having a go.
We do,
don't we?
Scotland's
but that's
not
healthy.
one. Yeah,
it's
no,
healthy,
it
isn't
is.
it?
Scotland's not one to lie down, are they?
Yeah. So let's move on to the next story, and it's quite sad news. It's Scott Hutchison from Frightened Rabbit, which he sadly, as we probably suspect, committed suicide the other day. And this has raised quite a lot of questions around mental health. The main factor being, you know, some people have been pointing out, it doesn't matter if you're well known or famous or loved by thousands, if not millions. You know, everyone can be in a vulnerable position, no matter what. So, Kelly, you're a mental health activist. You know, how would you? Is that really the case? It doesn't really matter who you are. Anyone can. Sort of
Oh, absolutely. I think it actually affects a lot more of us than we realise. I think the biggest step that we can take forward in this is creating a conversation and normalising this as a normal illness, because that's exactly what it is. It's such a taboo subject, and it's something that particularly men really, really struggle to talk about. And I think that feeds into other issues, but I think just creating a conversation about this is the best way forward for actually, you know, finding a resolution and stopping these things from happening. And they're so preventable. This doesn't need to be the outcome of depression at all. It doesn't have to be like that. But absolutely it can affect absolutely anybody. And I think it actually does affect more of us than we realise.
What could young people do if they're in a position? I mean, I don't want to say depression. I don't want to give any labels or anything, because obviously many of us haven't been in a position before. But if you're in a position similar to Scott Hutchison, what routes could you take to make sure that you're seeking the right and correct help?
I think it's as much the responsibility of the people around that person. I think the best thing that we could all do is educate ourselves on this topic and know the signs and the symptoms and be able to recognise when someone's behaviour is abnormal and is a risk to themselves. I think as someone that has suffered from depression in particular, it's very, very difficult as someone in that position to notice that you're in a place where you really need help and you need to speak to someone about it. It can also be very, very difficult. It's a very scary thing to talk about. It's a very, difficult thing to actually approach someone and say, look, this is how I'm feeling. And that is why it ends in so many deaths, because it's like a barrier. There's just no open conversations about it. But as a young person, I would say, if you notice that's the biggest problem, is noticing that you think there's something definitely not right and there's something that you need to talk about. Once you've noticed that, that's the first step. Actually acknowledging the problem is definitely the first step. After that, I would probably phone the Samaritans, phone a help. There's plenty of helplines out there that are completely anonymous, completely confidential. They don't even need to know your name. They can just have a chat with you. The Samaritans in particular are active 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So there's never nobody there to talk to. There's always an ear to listen. So just the easiest thing to do would be pick up the phone, and there's no pressure. They don't even know who you are. So absolutely, the first step I would take would be phone a helpline.
Linda, with regards to the Scottish Government, or maybe even more openly the Scottish Parliament, what have they done overall together to try and tackle mental health issues for not just even young people, but for everyone of all ages and all genders?
Yeah, I'm glad that you're talking about the Parliament as a whole, because regardless of party affiliations or anything else, despite all the arguments that go on, there is a will there to do what Kelly says and try and get a parity of attention between bad physical health and bad mental health. The government now has a dedicated mental health minister, and that's the first time that's ever happened. There is, I think, less of a stigma than there was, for example, when I was Kelly's age, long time ago, and growing up, but it's still there.
Right.
And we do have to talk about it, we do have to recognise it. And if we could get to the point where people don't feel that they're a failure because they're suffering a mental health issue, that would be so important. Next week's Mental Health Awareness Week. I think there's a responsibility on all of us that are in a position to be heard, to be speaking out and to be saying, this is normal for many, many people. It's an ill health. So there's more happening than has ever happened before. That's good, but there's still a long way to go. But one of the reasons I believe that it seems as if we have this massive hill to climb is because there are more people coming forward and talking. Still not enough, but it is there. We're recognising mental health conditions in a way we never did before. And when I look back, even to my school days, I can look back now and think, oh, I think that's what was wrong with that person. I think that classmate maybe suffered from this. And nobody recognised it, even as something that could happen. So the fact that we are talking openly about these things is good. We've got to keep that up, got to keep that momentum going. And we need more mental health professionals. There's a general shortage. We know that we're not meeting the demand, but it's a very specialised field. And that's where people like the Samaritans come in. It's where people like the organisation Breathing Space comes in. Talking's good, and human interaction is good for so many, many of these mental health conditions.
We talk about the stigma around these mental health issues. Where do they generally come from? Do they come from the individual who feels like they put the stigma on themselves? Does it come from media? Again, for many of us who haven't been through these issues, we're not really well informed. So can you maybe spam some light of where the stigma comes from, possibly?
I think it comes from everywhere. I think there's definitely an internalised thing where you think in your head that people aren't going to accept you and aren't going to, understand. And from that sense, I think that is like an internal thing. But I think society as a whole just has the complete wrong attitude towards mental health. I think it's actually down to ignorance. It's not down to, you know, that we don't want to you know, be open to these people. It's that we're genuinely not educated enough on the subject. We don't know the signs and symptoms to look out for. I mean, like I say, I've struggled with mental health issues for the last 10 years, and about a year ago I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and it's only recently come to light that actually my mental health difficulties are a lot more complex than we originally thought. And you know, I've seen, you know, countless professionals over these amount of years. I've seen, you know, school guidance teachers, I've seen counsellors, and nobody picked up on any of the signs and symptoms that I was showing. It's taken until I'm 21, and it was actually my stepmum that went away and scratched beneath the surface and went and looked up my symptoms and actually did some like digging for herself, to actually get to the bottom of what's going on. And I think that's a massive, massive problem. I mean, if it's taken me 10 years to get a diagnosis, there are obviously, you know, hundreds of thousands of other people in the same position. And I think all it would take is just a little bit more education, just even in school, even just educating children from an early age about the signs and symptoms of different mental health conditions, what they mean and how they're completely normal, and just normalise it from the very beginning.
You talked about before when it came to advice for someone who's going through these mental health issues, and you said about people noticing they've missed it because they weren't educated enough. Do you have any basic tips or advice for those who aren't suffering but those who may notice it, how they could possibly interact, try and help themselves? Is it a point of they maybe shouldn't get too involved? Is it a point of maybe it's just a subtle way of learning to help? What advice would you give there?
I think it's very important to always, you know, take a back seat. Don't, you know, it's very easy to give somebody that's suffering with a mental illness your advice and tell them what you think they should do, and that's completely the wrong angle to take. It's better to ask as open questions as possible. Just ask how they're feeling, why they feel like that, what's happened to make them feel like that. Just let them carry the conversation on. It can be a very, very difficult conversation to have, which is completely understandable. But just as relaxed as possible, just very open questions, and let them tell you. Don't, you know, oh, this is how you're feeling, this is what you should do. It should very much be coming from them, but encourage the conversation.
We notice as well when it comes to mental health issues that a lot of it does seem to be around the music industry.
Yeah.
There's also this kind of way back theory, the idea that young people, you know, a lot of famous people being dying at the age of 28, a lot of it from suicide.
Yeah.
Is there something in the music industry that adds more pressures to mental health, or is it not just music industry? It's actually, you know, all different sectors of society itself, or is there something, you know, specific with the music industry that might add pressure to it?
I mean, I imagine the music industry, being in you know, a public light is very, very difficult for somebody that has a mental health issue. It's difficult enough when, you know, the eyes of the world aren't on you. So I can only imagine the added pressures that they have, and I would say that that's absolutely what it's down to. I think it absolutely does affect, you know, all of society. Every single category in society is affected by this. It's not you know, just the music industry or whatever. It's right across the board. I think as well the music industry, like for Scott Hutchison for example, had been open about his mental health issues and had actually written songs and things about it, and I think it just wasn't ever taken seriously enough. I think it's very easy to ignore someone that you don't really know. I mean, his fans and stuff obviously know of him and know his music, but they don't know him personally. So for them to discuss his mental health with him would be, you know, a sort of a weird conversation to have. And I think it's very, very easy to pretend that it's not happening if it's somebody famous.
You mentioned before that Mental Health Week was next week, am I correct?
Yes, Mental Health Awareness Week.
Will you be attending any events? Is there any ways you'd encourage others to, any sources you recommend people to go to learn more about mental health? Even if not even those who are suffering from it, those who can just in general learn different devices. You know, any events you're going to and any sources we can look at to learn more?
There will be events in Parliament, of course, and I mean certainly what myself and colleagues will do is take their advice as to how we can spread that awareness, whether it be through social media, whether it be perhaps going to visit groups that are already within our constituencies that perhaps we have visited before with less understanding, or that we can learn about and go and visit. So I think that would be typical of what MSPs will certainly be doing.
Yeah, I think the biggest resource we could use right now is social media. I think especially for young people, it's such a massive issue amongst young people in particular. Social media is definitely a huge tool that we should really be putting to better use. I imagine there will be all sorts of hashtags next week. I would follow the official hashtags and just read through the information. Also, all of this information is available on the Samaritans website. Advice on how to approach someone with suicidal thoughts and feelings, just advice in general on mental health is all available on the Samaritans website. It literally would take 5 minutes to read through it. So anybody that wants to learn more about it, I would absolutely point them in that direction.
Can I say something about the Samaritans?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just that I thought about the Samaritans and how I was talking earlier about how many years ago there was a different way of looking at these things. I actually, many years ago, was a Samaritan volunteer for a while. And when I think back to that time, there wasn't any real training given. It was purely about somebody being on the other end of the phone. And I hope that perhaps helped people that did call. But now the Samaritans is such a knowledgeable and professional organisation. The training for volunteers is huge. They know where to signpost people, and they know how to deal with it much better. And I think that is a mark of the fact that we are going in the right direction, although sometimes it must seem we're not. There's many organisations there that are fully committed and fully professional in the way that they deal with things.
Great. We're going to move on to Matthew Gibbs' song, Waiting. But before we do, I'd like to reiterate that if yourself want to learn more about mental health issues, I would encourage, as Linda has said, to go to the Scottish Parliament next week and learn more about these issues. And if you feel like you're yourself are in a position and unsure about your current state, there are many sources you can go to, as I said before, the Samaritans, and many more which I can't remember off the top of my head, but we'll share them out later on. So there's always someone there for you. Just honestly, use the platform you have to learn out more. But anyway, moving on, we will go to Matthew Gibb. He'll be singing the song Waiting from Here and Now.
I first saw you such a short time ago. I was slipping with the flow before you came, and I've seen you run, but I don't fit in with your crowd. Like I've been knocked off my cloud, number 9. Even if I tried, I know it's all a lie. Well, I can't do that to myself again. No, I can't do that to myself again. Didn't have to sail these 7 seas to make a mock of my memory. But this guy's on his knees and he's begging, please. Even if I tried, I know it's all a lie. But I can't do that to myself again. No, I can't do that to myself again. No, I can't do that to myself again. No, I can't do that to myself again. I've been waiting, no, I've been waiting, no, I've been waiting. Oh, I've been waiting, no, I've been waiting, no, I've been waiting. Oh, I've been waiting, no, I've been waiting, no, I've been waiting for someone like you. Oh, I've been waiting, no, I've been waiting for someone like you. for someone like you. Didn't have to sail the 7 seas to make it, mocking my memory. This guy's on his knees, and he's begging please. Even if I tried, I know it's all a lie, but I can't do that to myself again. 'Cause I've been waiting, oh I've been waiting, no I've been waiting. 'Cause I've been waiting, no I've been waiting, no I've been waiting for someone like you. For someone like you. For someone like you. Oh, oh, oh.
Welcome back to the Full Scottish. We're going to move on now to the topic of Brexit and Clause 11. So this is going to be a topic of discussion for sure. We know coming Tuesday the Scottish Parliament will vote if they wish to give their consent to the Brexit bill, specifically on Clause 11, which, Linda, you can give your opinion. How do you think the Scottish Parliament will vote of Clause 11? Now, what is Clause 11 actually, just to kind of, expand on that?
First of all, a legislative consent motion is a convention that's required if Westminster is going to vote on behalf of the Scottish Parliament. Convention is that the Scottish Parliament gives permission for them to do that. So, there's the EU withdrawal bill, and on Tuesday the Scottish Parliament will have a debate on the legislative consent motion. Clause 11 is about the powers being taken back to Westminster when they come from Europe, powers that are devolved and that Scotland is responsible for and should retain responsibility for. So Clause 11's around all that, and there hasn't been agreement between Scottish Government and Westminster about this. So, on Tuesday the Parliament will vote as to whether to give permission for Westminster to legislate. All parties except the Conservatives have said that they're not happy with Clause 11 and that they will not give consent to the legislative consent motion. So watch the space for what happens after that. That's when it will get really interesting.
What is the main argument then against Clause 11? Because earlier there was a debate about 111 powers that are up for debate, and now this specifically seems to be talking about 24 or 25. So what is the actual debate within Clause 11? What's the disagreement?
Well, what Westminster is saying is we'll take all the powers back. And look at environmental powers, look at power over fisheries and all these things. And what they have said now is that they're happy to, within the next so many years, let Scotland have the responsibility for these powers back. And we're saying, hey, hold on a minute. There's a lot of damage can be done in that time. We want them back immediately. They should immediately come back to Scotland. Or there should be a very good reason why a particular one doesn't straight away. We can set up frameworks, we can set up agreements. But what Westminster is saying is that the power's entirely in our hands and we'll decide when you get them back. And that's just not on, because we have a devolved Parliament. The people voted for a devolved Parliament. We have the right to take decisions on these matters that are the responsibility of our Parliament. And to have them just unilaterally taken away like that is just completely out of order. I'm really pleased that all the other parties, except the Conservatives, are backing that up and agreeing with that stance. It's about protecting our Parliament. And I fail to understand how anybody can logically say that our position is not the right position to take.
Kelly, how do you personally feel the attitude from down south in Westminster has been towards Holyrood? Do you think there has been good negotiations? Do you think there's basically been kind of childish play here? How do you view the scenario yourself?
The entire thing just shows a complete contempt for our Parliament from Westminster. It's became, abundantly clear that they're not interested in the Scottish Parliament, they're not interested in what it represents, they're not interested in what the people of Scotland voted for, and they're, just looking to assert that power, and it actually beggars belief that they think that that's the normal way to behave and the right way to behave, let alone, that Scotland didn't vote for Brexit. We should absolutely 100% have our say and have our seat at the table, and to just sweep in and take away our powers like that with no demand for such within the Scottish population is absolutely ridiculous. It's completely undemocratic, and like I say, it just shows a complete contempt for our Parliament.
Linda, I can imagine what Ruth Davidson and other Conservatives would argue is that the reason these powers are going down south first is because of they're protecting the UK internal market. Do you accept that as a fair argument to make? That actually to preserve the UK, to make sure that there's no hard borders between different regions of the UK, they need to go down to Westminster first?
No, I don't accept it at all. One of the things that was said, at the time of our independence referendum, at the time of the vow, all that stuff that came in was about mutual respect, equal partners. There's no respect here. There's no partnership. What you have is a Westminster government saying, our Parliament's sovereign, we'll do what we like, and actually, you should just get back in your box and do what we tell you. And no, we won't reach any agreements with you at all. We won't put frameworks in place that guarantee the rights of the people of Scotland and your Parliament. We'll decide. And it's just unacceptable. We even had the Secretary of State for Scotland was in front of one, I think it was a Europe committee during the week, and just wouldn't commit to anything. So I'm not convinced it's 100% arrogance. I think there's a mixture there between arrogance and chaos, because when you look at the whole Brexit debate and about the single market and all the negotiations going on with the European Union, it strikes me that nobody's really got a handle on what's going on. They're all over the place, complete chaos, and I think we're part of that chaos, as well as a non-understanding and an arrogance at Westminster about what the Scottish Parliament is and the rights of the Scottish people.
They were talking about earlier that within Clause 11 there was three options for consent. If the Scottish Parliament does consent, that's great. If the Scottish Parliament doesn't vote on it at all, then that's seen as consent.
Yeah.
And if the Scottish Parliament doesn't give consent and rejects it straight up, that's seen as consent.
Yeah.
Now, Ruth Davidson, if she wanted to, she could use 13 of her MPs down in London, and they could vote down this bill by making the government lose a majority. She could do that and say she was standing up for the interests of Scotland within a union and strengthen kind of union strengths. Do you think she could do that? And if she wouldn't do that, well, why wouldn't she?
Well, I can't make it personal about Ruth because I don't know what her own personal ambitions are. But we should always remember it's a Conservative and Unionist party. The Conservatives actually voted against even having a devolved Parliament. They didn't want it in the first place. They then accepted the will of the people. That was fine, and we moved on from that. But whenever push comes to shove, in my experience, whether it's through further powers negotiations, whether it's through talking about the rights of the Scottish people and the ultimate, our next independence referendum, they very much look to Westminster. And it's all about the UK and the UK Parliament. And I don't believe that Ruth Davidson and her team are any different in that regard from any other Conservative and Unionists that have gone before. I think the Labour Party are starting to recognise this. I mean, there's times when they've seen more Unionists than the Conservatives. I think they're now starting to recognise that we have a real danger in Scotland of losing what so many people fought so long for. Some of us see it as a stepping stone, others see it as an end game. Regardless of how you see it, that's what the people of Scotland voted for. That's what should be maintained. And if the Scottish Conservatives under Ruth Davidson are really standing up for Scotland, they should be standing with us and saying, no, you're not taking our powers away. We're protecting Scotland's national parliament.
You mentioned Labour, and just in the news today and yesterday, there's been talks of kind of radical federalism within the UK, which could solve the problem and the constitutional question in Scotland. Kelly, do you buy into Labour's argument, the idea of federalism? Because Gordon Brown also said back in 2014 that by voting no on the Smith Commission, we would have a home rule federal UK. So if we don't have, if we have that now, then what is this new offer Labour are really thinking about? Do we have federalism now? Do you buy into the argument?
I don't at all. I mean, I think. I'm not going to get too personal about the Labour Party, but I just think that they don't know left from right at the moment. They don't know, what they're promising or what they want to achieve. It's been that way for the last couple of years. They've changed their position numerous times on numerous different issues. It's very difficult to take anything that they say with any sort of seriousness. So absolutely not. No, I don't buy into the Labour argument.
Linda?
We've heard it all before. Lost count of the number of times we've heard about as near to home rule as possible, real home rule, federalism, and here we are again. Every time there's a constitutional question, they come up with another idea. It's kicking it into the long grass. And if you actually look at the UK and you look at the potential of federalism, first of all, when you've got one partner that is so much bigger than all the other partners, and who has proved over the years that it's no so keen in giving away real power, that's a non-starter. And then if you look at the latest idea, which is about assemblies all over the place in different parts of England, we've been there before, a good few years ago. I remember going and speaking at events in the northeast of England and the northwest of England. I think John Prescott had mooted this idea of assemblies there. There wasn't the will for it amongst the folks there. So we're just revisiting something that's gone before. And it's about time Labour recognised that even within their own ranks and their own membership, there are people who want independence. There are people who wouldn't have a problem with independence if that was the will of the people. So it's about time they recognise what's really there in their membership in Scotland and stop looking south for some saviour like Jeremy Corbyn to come along and make it all okay again, because he's only retreading all the old arguments and people just aren't buying it anymore.
I think sorry, can I come in on that? I think as well, the Labour Party in general is just utter chaos at the moment, and I think they would actually find a lot more success if they looked within their ranks, like Linda said, and actually appreciate that there are people within their ranks that want independence and, like you say, wouldn't mind independence. I think if they actually looked inward instead of looking down south, they would actually be a lot more successful, particularly in Scotland.
Yeah.
When it comes to going back to the Conservatives again, recently Downing Street released a statement saying that if these powers went straight to the Scottish Parliament, that means that not only could the SNP in Holyrood veto trade deals, and not only could Labour in Wales veto trade deals, but also Sinn Féin could veto trade deals on behalf of the UK. So pulling the Sinn Féin argument that basically almost, as you may say it, terrorist sympathisers would be holding the cards. Is that an argument you would potentially buy, and is that not the case to an extent?
I would go back to all the talk about partnership and respect that they talk about. David Cameron made a big deal of that on behalf of the Tory government at the time. And what they're saying when they come up with all these arguments, what they're saying is, we don't respect any other institution, any other parliament that's here within the British Isles. We don't respect the fact that the SNP is a democratically elected government in Scotland. We don't even have an assembly in the north of Ireland at the moment. That's another ongoing discussion. And we have the absolute mess that is trying to deal with the issues between Ireland as an EU state and Northern Ireland as part of the UK. So they're scrabbling about looking for anything to justify a position that cannot be logically justified and cannot be ethically justified.
So we've talked about Labour's position, which is federalism, talked about the UK government's position, which obviously they're pushing ahead with Clause 11. But Linda, what's the SNP's position in all of this? I mean, they produced a paper, Scotland's Future. Can you maybe expand on that and what their main ideas around that were?
Well, the SNP's position is very, very clear. The SNP believes that Scotland should be an independent sovereign nation within the European Union. Our position has always been very clear. We also believe in the right of the people to decide that. So we believe in the right of referenda to make these constitutional decisions. But we also always have to look after the best interests of Scotland. And at the moment, Nicola Sturgeon, on behalf of the SNP, is looking after the best interests of Scotland. And the main thing right now is don't take away our powers, don't take away our responsibilities, because we are working for Scotland and will continue to do it. I'm glad that to a certain degree the Conservatives, of course the Greens, and now the Labour Party in Scotland are backing us on that. That's the big argument at the moment. Don't lessen our Parliament.
Some people have pointed out, though, that within the white paper you stress quite strongly about staying in the single market with the rest of the UK as an option. So would that not be a sense of people are kind of confused of what the SNP represent? I mean, the SNP support independence, but the paper you presented also talked about the UK staying in the single market. So if the UK did stay in the single market, would the independence option be off the table?
No, because you have to look at the realities. You have to look at the reality of how the UK as a political construct and the British Isles geographically are set up. We have partners. England is our nearest neighbour. Wales shares the same bit of land as we do. You have to be sensible about these things. Good neighbours is what we would wish. We would wish to make our own decisions, and we would wish to have good neighbours on our border. And it's perfectly possible if that respect that they keep talking about is truly brought into play. I mean, why would they talk on one hand about no borders with Ireland, you know, when we come out of the EU, right, okay, but if Scotland went independent we would have to have this border with border posts. It's absolutely ludicrous. So it's about an independent Scotland making its own decisions, and one of these decisions, depending on what government was elected in an independent Scotland, may well be that the best interest of the country is to maintain all these links within the UK.
Final point on this issue for both of you to answer on: should we have a second EU referendum to decide our future with a deal with the EU? Yes or no? And if yes, if no, why?
I think it's too soon to be definitive about that. We're not at the end game yet. We have to wait and see what they come up with. It's total chaos at the moment. We certainly shouldn't be rushing into anything, and we should be waiting to see what the UK government come back with, and we will make the decision based on events and based on circumstances.
I would completely agree. I think also, though it's not something I would ever rule out, I think I would advocate for another Scottish independence referendum, so I don't see why I would be against another EU referendum. But absolutely right now is not a good time for it. I think we need to let this settle down a bit and see what they come up with before we can actually make that decision. I mean, the people of Scotland aren't well informed enough at this point to make that decision. So
none of us are.
No.
You sit there and you look at it and say, what on earth is going on here? There's a bit of me keeps thinking, surely somebody knows what they're doing. Oh. And then I look at it and think, no, they don't.
We'll now move on to the final story for today. It is good news, actually. It's Channel 4 News are moving their HQ out of London, and Glasgow have put forward their bid for the HQ to be there. Now, Stuart MacDonald, I do believe, he had a nice line saying that if Channel 4 was any city, it would be Glasgow. So, Kelly, how do you feel about this? Do you think Glasgow's a good place for the new HQ for Channel 4?
absolutely, I think it's the obvious choice. I mean, I'm probably a little bit biased, but
I think we're all a little bit biased, to be honest.
I think it'd be an absolutely fantastic thing for both Channel 4 and for Glasgow. I think it's something that we could really use here, and it would be fantastic to see it come here.
Linda, talk to me about yourself, about you in Glasgow, because I mean we've seen crazy change of Glasgow for decades now. We had the Commonwealth Games there, for example, just recently, which brought a lot of revenue in. So tell me about how have you seen Glasgow change throughout the years?
That's a very nice way of saying you're very old, Linda.
I was not suggesting that. You are merely more experienced than all of us here.
Well, Glasgow has changed hugely over the years. I was raised in Glasgow in Partick, and it was very much an industrial city. That's how I remember it. I also remember it as being, when I use the word a dirty city, I don't mean that really pejoratively, but it was before all the buildings were sandblasted and that lovely red and grey sandstone and blonde sandstone came out. It was before we had smokeless zones. See, I really am very old. It was before we had smokeless zones. So one of my memories, terrible fogs and things that went on. And Glasgow wasn't really thought of as a centre for culture. We'd wonderful museums and galleries like the People's Palace, and we called it the Art Gallery. It's Kelvin Grove Museums, its proper name, and fantastic parks. But there's been a real sea change in Glasgow that I and my fellow travellers have seen, and a lot of that has focused around, well, there was a garden festival, that was major for Glasgow, and a lot of our artists and writers were very, very instrumental in changing Glasgow from that thought of as industrial and a bit rough to Glasgow as a centre for culture. We now have all the wonderful stuff along the Clyde that's been happening. We have both the BBC and ITV, or STV, although it's still really ITV, but hey, down in the Clyde, we have broadcasting centres, we have wonderful art, we have great theatre, International City Music designation through the UN. Glasgow's fabulous, and it's a natural home for the likes of Channel 4. Again, I remember when Channel 4 started, and it was really cutting edge. And we were all quite amazed by... We used to get wee dots in the top of the screen to warn you that it was going to be a bit risque, whatever came on. I know you two will find that really hard to believe, but we did. And so if you saw the dot coming on the screen, everybody watched, just to see what it was. And so it was really cutting edge, and I'd like to see Channel 4 continuing that way. Glasgow's a natural home for it as far as I'm concerned, and that was a great line in my colleague Stuart MacDonald, and he's absolutely right. Glasgow's sassy, Glasgow's cutting edge. Channel 4's a natural fit.
If Channel 4 did bring their HQ here, hypothetically speaking, what kind of opportunities would that bring? What would happen? Would there be be a great opportunity for young journalists to get involved? What are the opportunities for there?
There's so much going on. I mean, we're starting to see some real growth in our film industry as well. Lots of productions being filmed in and around Scotland, in and around Glasgow. So there's an opportunity for that if we get a film studio in Scotland. Having something at Channel 4, and Channel 4's not just a telly station, and Channel 4 make films and things as well. So there's a lot of opportunities there for journalism, for production, for the artists themselves to have a showcase. Comedy, Channel 4's always been really good at comedy. Glasgow's full of comedians,
You see that again?
And back to that natural fit and the real vibrancy. And I would hope it would benefit the whole city, because Glasgow still has issues. It's not all wonderful stuff happening. There's still issues, and I would like to see it benefiting everybody, and perhaps from educational provision as well. The idea of being able to look at new careers in broadcasting, in the media, in filmmaking, in theatre, all of that doesn't actually require you to have to look south to really make it big.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. But before we end, I would like to say two things. One, if you're interested in broadcasting and media and writing and filming, we here at Broadcasting Scotland have tons of opportunities yourself. So if you want to get involved, feel free to contact us. But if you don't want to, get involved, but you support what we do, feel free to subscribe. You can pay by subscription, or if you want, you just give your general support by liking and sharing on social media accounts. But feel free, please go to our website, get involved and share it along all you can. But as we end today, we're going to end with, again, Matthew Gibb with his song, Wish I'd Know. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time, next Sunday.
me thinking about all the times we got so close. And since that first time I spoke to you, these conversations never seem to stop, because and all that I could say was hello. Kneeling on the floor, praying more and more. I'd be there if I was away here, and I'd have stayed if you had said. But your hands went over my head, but your hands went over my head. I wish I'd known, 'cause I get so tired. I wish I'd known, 'cause I'd be by your side. I wish I'd known, well, anything simplified. I wish I'd known, I wish I'd known all along. I wish I'd known all along. And that dream's been haunting me for weeks now. Keeps playing over in my head, but I feel like I'm drowning now, because it just could have been so real. Kneeling on the floor, praying more and more. I'd be there if I was away here, and I'd have stayed if you had said. But your hands went over my head, but your hands went over my head, but your hands went over my head. I wish I'd known, 'cause I get so tired. I wish I'd known, 'cause I'd be by your side. I wish I'd known, well, anything simplified. I wish I'd known, I wish I'd known all along. I wish I'd known all along. And it's the one thing that I can't do anything about. And it's the one thing that I can't do anything about. And it's the one thing that I can't do anything about, even if I tried. Oh, even if I tried. Kneeling on the floor, praying more and more. I'd be there if I was away here, and I'd have stayed if you had said. But your hands went over my head, but your hands went over my head, but your hands went over my head. I wish I'd known, 'cause I get so tired. I wish I'd known, 'cause I'd be by your side. I wish I'd known, well, anything simplified. I wish I'd known, I wish I'd known all along. I wish I'd known all along. I wish I'd known all along.